All right, there we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another governance and risk call here at MakerDAO. Looks like this is the 230th. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I am one of your governance facilitators. Joined today by a bunch of awesome people who contribute or are generally interested in the Maker protocol. This is our open weekly call where we discuss what's going on the governance side and protocol risk. I can imagine there are maybe a few things more than normal to discuss on this call today, so we'll try to get to those and hopefully have plenty of time for questions and discussions as well. Before we get into it, though, there are a few ground rules I would love to go over. As you might have noticed, this is being recorded, so hello if you're watching on YouTube. For everyone who's present in the call, let's try not to talk over each other. It'll make it more pleasant for us, more pleasant for the audio technicians later. Just generally, treat people how you want to be treated. We can discuss tough questions, but if we remember each other's humanity, we generally get a lot farther and can actually engage in the discussion of the matter. I much appreciate that for a call like today where things might be a little more heated. Let's use reactions in the chat if you have things to talk about. If you use that raise hand feature, it lets me know you would love to hop on the mic when the current person finishes speaking. And I'm more than happy to call you out when conversationally appropriate to do so. I'll try to introduce you, but remember, I may not know you. I may not recognize your Zoom name. So if I forget or you want to help me out with what project you're on or who you're representing, feel free to do so. And finally, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. As usual, we'll start with our votes and the MIPs roundup today. Then we'll get into an initiative update where you'll hear a little bit about the events of this weekend, that first emergency spell and the timeline response to that. Expecting there to be plenty of questions. We got Patrick who put together an awesome slide deck to walk us through it. And then we'll be getting into MIP65, that's monocolic. I've obviously been discussing them a lot this week. We had a few polls wrap up. That means some pretty big things for what governance wants to do. So we'll hopefully have a chance to talk about their structure and what it means for the future. All right, I promise not too much more blabbing me, but I do need to let you know what's going on with our votes that ended. So we have the vote to remove the DCIM from MIP65. That's that monocolic facility that passed, as well as a debt ceiling increase for them. We did have one poll that failed, and that was the short ratification poll for vault setting amendment. That was a poll put up to modify the MIP92 urine finance the facility that has not been enacted yet, but you can edit if voters wish. Unfortunately, this proposal did not go through. The final one that did pass was return excess funds from MIP65 to surplus buffer. Did a little maker digging. This was not the first 100% unanimous poll, but it was 100%, no abstains or negative votes. And you'll hear about 18 ratification votes updates in the MIP segment. You might have noticed on the spell front, we had a number of executives get back here. First, the initial PSM changes that we'll be going over in a bit more detail today. I didn't list them on this slide. And then we did have that second emergency spell that added the debt ceiling breaker. So that's what's happened in the past. As far as next week goes, we do have a number of items we're hoping to get in, including some DAI transfers, MKR transfers, updating the rocket pool debt ceiling, and some of the monocolic stuff, assuming that it's ready to go. All right. That I will hand over the mic to our MIP editors. I believe we have Gala on the call today to walk us through.
Hey, Peyton, thanks. So yes, as Peyton just mentioned, the ratification poll for MIP92C5 sub-proposal 1. So the one that the vault setting amendment sub-proposal went on chain on Monday and was rejected. Next, we have 18 formal submissions that went on chain as ratification polls this Monday. For standalone MIPs and others, there's MIP116, D3M to Sparkland. We have the Maker Constitution MIP set, that is MIP 101 through MIP 114, plus MIP 102 C2 subproposal 1, And there's MIP42 sub-proposal 34, an amendment to expand the facilitator definition and allow entities. All of these are passing. Next, for core unit facilitators and mandates, there is a facilitator onboarding for Retro to facilitate CES. Building on the amendment I just mentioned, we have entities applying to become facilitators for protocol engineering and risk core units. And we have a mandate change as well for SAS, which is also changing its name to SideStream Automation Services. Next, we have 2 slides of core unit budgets. All core unit budgets requests, the ones on this slide and the next one, are passing. MIP40C3 sub-proposal 89 is the only exception, and it's a request to stop the funding for the core unit. This one is not passing. Yep. So next one, here we have risk, strategic finance, SAS, and data insights for unit proposals. And finally, for the funding proposals, there's 2 protocol data transfers, one for SARGNET core unit and one for TechOps core unit, and the special purpose fund for the launch of Sparkland. These ratification polls, all of them will be on chain until Monday, March the 27th. So it's in 10 days. Go cast your votes if you haven't done it so far. So next, what we are going to do is do a quick overview on the scope frameworks. So these are 12, MIP 103 through MIP 114, and we're going to try to introduce the focus areas of each scope as per the MIPs. So there's MIP 103, the stability and liquidity scope framework. The focus areas are on asset liability management, die savings rate adjustment, and stability fee-based rate adjustment. Then the decentralized collateral scope framework, focusing on decentralized collateral offered in Maker core vaults, and also lines of credits to other entities collateralized by decentralized assets. MIP 105, the real world asset collateral scope framework, focusing on direct exposure by Maker core to stable coins. And this is during pregame only. It's direct exposure to advanced real-world asset collateral types, including on-chain bond products and complex loans. There's MIP 106, the ecosystem scope framework, focusing on connecting and supporting critical pieces of the Maker ecosystem for it to function, and ensuring best practices for transparency, accountability, and prioritization in the ecosystem. Yes, this is a Maker Constitution MIP set. So next, there's a MIP 107, the protocol engineering scope framework, focusing on core Maker protocol maintenance and development. And this includes all critical components that are not considered collateral components. MIP 108, the growth scope framework, focusing on marketing, public relations, education and awareness campaigns, and also on the rebranding of Maker and DAI. MIP 109 is the physical resilience scope framework. So it's legal research, regulatory and government relations, strategy and resource allocation, privacy and operational security research, and tool development, and also just-tune parameters for the defensive stance. MIP 110, the interface scope framework, focusing on the EGF, so the easy governance front end, maintenance and the development, decentralized security requirements, as well as other interface related topics. And then we have the last 4 scope frameworks, MIP 111, the infrastructure scope framework, focusing on keepers, infrastructure tools, Maker Teleport, Oracle needs for Maker Core, and the standards, the Oracle standards for sub-DAOs, and other infrastructure related topics. There's MIP 112, the finance scope framework. So it's all about internal finance of the Maker protocol and Maker ecosystem, key financial parameters, and financial reporting and transparency. MIP113, the arbitration scope framework. The focus areas are high-level decision-making, constitutional interpretation, constitutional conservers regulation, core governance processes regulation, and it plays a critical role in governance security. And finally, we have MIP114, the governance security scope framework, which focuses in the requirements and processes to securely deploy executive votes and expose them in the governance front ends. So I hope you like the reading along with me and the overview. Let us know if you have any questions. And yes, remember there's a big governance cycle going on in the portal. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, much appreciated. So we kind of made it through most of the constitution in kind of these GNRs, hopefully without taking up too much of your time at one go. So we'll try to clip these together and make them shareable for people to view. As a reminder, you do have 10 days left on the ratification poll. The Constitution MIP, that is just one of those 18 votes. So do make sure that you're reviewing everything and voting if you have an opinion. And thanks again, Gal. That was great. All right. That'll take us to our initiative updates. Hopefully you are not tired of GovAlpha, because I am going to hand over the mic to Patrick, who's going to be walking us through the emergency response timeline.
Hi, everyone. So Peyton, if you can go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to take the opportunity on the GNR to run down kind of the events of Saturday, or Saturday my time, Friday evening into Saturday, maybe in the States, where we had a fairly significant event when the USDC depegged and DAI followed it. And we ended up needing to post an emergency executive in the kind of early afternoon European time, early morning American time. And a lot of the questions we were seeing in Discord were like, where are the teams? What are they up to? Why aren't they here answering questions? And what's happening next? And I kind of wanted to run through what was happening in kind of maybe more private channels that people can't necessarily see in Discord, and to try and give people an overview of how we as a group were collaborating, and also kind of how decisions were made, and kind of just when different people were involved. So we're going to go through the timeline, what happened. This is going to be specific to the 11th. We're not going to cover the second out of schedule executive, which went up on Monday. But if people want to ask questions about that, we can cover that in the discussion segment. We're then going to summarize kind of maybe what would we do differently. And by we, I mean GovAlpha. I think we've had a chance to reflect and maybe thought of ways we could have improved the process. Although I will say I was very impressed with everyone who was involved. And I don't want anyone to take away that as a criticism. I think we did a great job, all things considered. And then we'll open it up if anyone's got any questions for GovAlpha or any of the other CUs that were involved on Saturday. So Peyton, if you could go ahead. So I'm going to run you all through the timeline, what happened. Anywhere a price is mentioned, it's going to be from CoinGecko as the source. And I've kind of, throughout the timeline, I've kind of scattered, what the USDC price was doing at the time to try and provide some context. All times that are noted here in UTC. Maker likes to, well, GovAlpha anyway, like to do things in UTC. And to be honest, I'm in UTC, so it was much easier for me to track times down in my own time zone. So I'll admit to that now. So just to set the stage, on Friday, UK time, we had the FDIC seizing control of Silicon Valley Bank. This had followed kind of days of rumors regarding solvency. And it was at this point that the risk team started war rooming and analyzing potential fallout risks on USDC and therefore DAI, given the structure of Maker and the PSM. Simultaneously, there were big concerns going on about Signature Bank, ultimately closing down 12% on their stock price, but had traded as low as kind of 30% during the day. This triggered further fears that Circle might be holding some of their assets there. Those numbers there are from Yahoo Finance. And then at kind of 10 p.m. on CoinGecko, we start to see these effects happening where USDC depegged to 99 cents. Peyton, if you could go to the next slide. So moving on into the 11th of March, kind of my time, we have our first kind of public within the team's post from the risk team. This happened at 1:40 my time, and this was in the Risk PE Oracle channel on Discord, which is a private channel for those teams. But GovAlpha, as admins of the Discord server, have access to that particular channel. We don't have access to all of the private channels, but this one we do have access to. So GovAlpha effectively is in that group as well. And Risk was saying, hey guys, we're investigating different possible courses of action related to the fall of SVB. We'll post here with further updates. So we then get to 2 a.m. and USDC continues to depeg. So we're now at 98.4 cents on the dollar. And then we have 2:30 where Bros Peyton is in private discussions with the risk team, talking through different options under our emergency processes under MIP24. We fast forward a little bit of time. There's a small gap here. And then we get to 4 a.m. Where we have USDC continuing to plunge. We're now down to 93 cents on the dollar. And then about half an hour after that, we have Peyton reaching out again in the Discord channel. And we also have members of PE joining the chat, essentially saying, hey, we probably need to do something here. So we then rapidly fire through. We have Peyton pinging the delegates on Discord saying, hey, stuff's happening. At this point, #governance, #speculation are starting to light up a bit as well. Be on alert. If we need you, we'll let you know, but there may well be some votes coming. We then have some conversations about Compound and the D3M at kind of 10 to 5, like, hey, Compound fixed their USDC price in a similar way to the PSM. That could really screw with the D3M that we have deployed there, and Risk recommended urgently shutting that down at this point. And actually, I still haven't seen the answer to this one, so that's a question I have for later. Do Aave do the same thing? What do Aave do with USDC? We were unsure, and rather than taking time out to find out, we decided, look, let's just turn off both D3Ms to be better safe than sorry. We then get to 5:15, and Risk share their first draft of the risk parameters. And we also get confirmation from PE that we can use a MOM to deactivate the D3Ms instantly on an executive passing. So the way Money in the chat there saying Aave uses a live price from Chainlink. So there we go. That's that question answered. So yeah, PE confirmed to us that yes, we can deactivate the D3Ms instantly when an executive passes. So that helps us silo risk a bit. And we're going to we may well come back to the topic of MOMs later on in the discussion segment, I guess. About 5:30 UK time, I logged on. Happened to be up with my daughter and my phone was lighting up. So I thought, hang on, I'm not going to get back to bed here. So logged on and helped out. So we had a discussion of urgency. And the risk team confirmed that yes, this is an emergency under the MIP24 frameworks, and GovAlpha were happy to confirm that as well. Based on that's one of our roles in MIP24. Is this a genuine emergency? Yes, it is. About 5:45, P after a discussion confirmed how long we had in the before the next debt ceiling increase of the USDC PSM. So we have a debt ceiling instant access module on the PSM, and that's set to increase by 950. Well, was set to increase by 950 million DAI every 24 hours. So we knew that it had increased 6 hours previously, and that we were sure we had 18 hours until the next increase. The risk team were quite keen to get a spell passed prior to that next increase, because that meant we could limit how much USDC we were going to take in. We didn't know how long USDC was going to be depegged for. Subsequently, the US government stepped in the following day, but at this point, this could have gone on and continued to get worse. So we were like, right, okay, let's limit it as far as we can to 2 increases of the DCIM, and then we'll see where we are. And then there was a quick conversation here, 5:55. We had a pending executive that hadn't yet executed but had been passed, and one of the changes in that was to raise the debt ceiling on the Compound D3M. And the question for PE was, hey, if we turn it off using the MOM, does that break the previous executive? Is that a blocker? And they confirmed that no, it's not, because we're changing different parameters, we're going to be fine. So if we can move on. So 6 a.m., we're still sitting USDC 93 cents on the dollar, and we saw on Twitter that Compound had paused USDC supply on Compound V2, which allayed a few fears. And that was because they have a Guardian multisig that's able to turn off certain markets. 15 minutes later, so we have confirmation from PE, yes, we can deliver an emergency executive before the next DCIM. And, at that point, I jumped onto Telegram. We have an emergency Telegram group with some of the delegates who volunteered let us have emergency contact them. And I pinged all them saying, hey, there's going to be an emergency executive today. Please stay alert. I'll come back and update you. We had a conversation, should we do one spell? Should we have multiple spells to get the most important things done, in sequence? We, being Gov Alpha, Peyton and I felt that a single spell would be preferable because you're not then asking to delegates or other voters to vote multiple times. You've got one spell, you're not moving the hat around, and it's just generally easier and safer to do it in one go from our perspective. And we also at that point started out reaching out to kind of known large holders. So Gov Alpha is in communication with people that we know are large holders and VCs. We have kind of various means of contacting them, and we were using these this time as well. 640. The risk team updated their draft of parameter changes, and shortly after that, 650, the PE team, who I think are the ones that were based in Europe, were starting to wake up and were starting to get to work coding on the spell, but they were working on it in a private repo to try and minimize any market risks or any market participants getting spooked by anything that Maker were doing. 7 a.m., USDC continues to depeg. We're now at 89 cents on the dollar. And at this point, some of the dev team from CES reached out to offer their services to protocol engineering. 20 past 7, we have suddenly the option of, hey, we may well need to do multiple execs here. Should we be thinking about reducing the GSM delay while we're doing it? So rather than waiting 48 hours, should we reduce that temporarily and allow ourselves more flexibility over the coming days? And various different parameters were suggested of what might be good. Peyton and I privately just felt that 16 hours was the absolute minimum that we as Gov Alpha would support here. That was based on the fact that if someone tried to abuse this reduced GSM to launch an attack on the protocol, it would be a big ask to try and get people to repel a malicious attack, and that 16 hours gave us the minimum amount of time to do that we were comfortable with. And then at 7:50 a.m., we had the final draft of parameters from Risk confirmed that this is what we're going to go with. Should we go forward again? Yeah. So then 8 a.m., we're down to 87 cents on the dollar. And I think that's the lowest price that I'm going to note in this timeline. And then we have the risk team have posted on the forum that, hey, we're going to have an emergency executive. Here are the parameters that we're going to change things to. And at this point, Pro's finally logged off to get some sleep at about 1 a.m. in his local time. We get to 9 a.m., we're about 91 cents on the dollar, maybe a bit of recovery here in the market. And then at 9:30, suddenly someone asks, oh, hey, do we have a mom that can turn off the USDC PSM? So we do have Oracle moms that can turn off some collateral types without waiting for the GSM delay. We've used these before to turn off the Curve LP back in April last year, some of you may remember. But it was confirmed that way the PSM structured, it's not possible to use one of these. About 15 minutes later, we got confirmation from PE that no, you won't be able to use that type of bypass here. So then we get to 10 a.m. We've finally reached consensus on the GSM delay going to 16 hours. Some people wanted it to go a bit higher, some people wanted it to go a bit lower, but ultimately there was finally a consensus reached. 11 a.m. Sitting about 90 cents on the dollar. We have final confirmation from Risk that yes, go ahead. These are the parameters we want you to put in the code. And then other teams started to get involved here. So we had the growth team reached out to me saying, hey, do you need any help with comms? So they got added into this channel that initially was Risk P and Oracle, and was starting to expand rapidly. Then we had about an hour gap while Gov Alpha, I woke up Astro, who helped me confirm spell copy, make sure everything was correct, and we got that over to PE. And I also pinged the delegates at this point saying, hey, it's coming soon, 1 to 2 hours. 1 p.m. It's saying 89 cents. 1:05 PE confirmed to me that the spell is deployed and being tested. And at 1:15, they give me the address for the spell on the blockchain. So whenever Gov Alpha is listing a spell on the portal, we have a number of pre-flight checks that we like to do. These include making sure that the code matches GitHub, making sure that everything that we're expecting to be in the spell is there, and making sure there's nothing in there that we don't expect to be there. So I went through all of these usual steps just to make sure that absolutely everything was as it should be. So let's go forward again, Peyton. That was backwards. So then three. Well, it says 3:45. That should say 1:45. That's a typo. The spell was live on the voting portal, and again, I reached out to the delegates on Telegram and Discord saying, "Hey, it's live, on you go!" And we had people voting within minutes, which was really good to see. And I believe actually Code Knight managed to beat me to the Discord announcement of it being live because he'd been watching Telegram. Then I posted on the forum and also notified the community in #governance, and then we also sent out pings to again known lodge holders via various different methods. 2 p.m., the MakerDAO Twitter account tweeted it out. So only 15 minutes after it had gone live, we had a tweet out explaining what the changes were, saying, and linking to the votes. That was great. Then 3 p.m., we had USDC trading about 91 cents on the dollar. 3:20, there was a small issue noted, which might have caused issues by PE with the global line parameters, where if we were reducing a number of volts to 0, we might run into issues with the global line parameter blocking new DAI being minted. But that wasn't expected to cause an immediate concern. That was more of a medium to long-term issue that might happen, and they rectified that in the spell that went out on Monday. So that's now no longer an issue, but just wanted to put that in there that it was noted and discussed. 4 p.m., again, sitting at 91 cents on the dollar, and just about 4:15, the executive passes, we saw the D3Ms shut off instantly, and then the remaining changes were scheduled to execute on Monday. And then throughout the course of the day here, so 6 p.m., 8 p.m., we see the price of USDC slowly returning to peg. And then just in the evening here, 20 to 11 my time, we had a call from Risk. Hey, we've got some further things we want to change, and can we bring in StratFi and growth for further discussions? And at this point, we set up a new channel saying, hey, this is the Risk P Oracle channel. We've really stretched that definition today. Let's set up a brand new channel where everyone can collaborate. And so what do we make of this? So kind of learning points from GovAlpha's point, like a lot of work went into this. A lot of teams were involved, a lot of people, people getting up early, people staying up late, people interrupting their weekends. And the fact that we got this done so quickly, I was super impressed with. I think, I wasn't expecting the code to be delivered as quickly as it was by PE. We'd set a cutoff of 11 p.m. UTC for when we wanted this passed, and it was passed, by 4:15 p.m. So we really beat that deadline by some hours. But there are maybe some things we would do differently. So just learning from this, how can we improve for the next time? Hopefully there won't be a next time, but how can we improve? So next time we would set up a new channel in Discord immediately. So rather than using an existing channel and just adding people in ad hoc, we would actually say, hey, this is going to be the emergency channel. Only people that need to be here are going to be here. And as we needed more people, we would add them in gradually. We think that would have been a much better way of managing this. Ideally, GovAlpha, this is criticism of us, we would have done a clearer allocation of roles such as comms, rather than trying to run everything ourselves, which is what we always try to do. It was really nice that people stepped up and offered to help. So we had CES reaching out to offer help with dev side, and we had growth reaching out to offer help with kind of comms. But really, we could have proactively reached out to these people and said, "Hey, we need help. Come help us." And then also, probably what would have been useful would have been a single war room voice call, which we didn't do this time. We have done previously, but rather than kind of the Risk team having a war room and the PE team having a war room and me and Peyton having a war room, we should have just had one big war room and said, hey, let's all get on voice chat. Let's hash this out. Because then rather than someone posting in chat saying, hey, let's set the GSM to 16 hours and then waiting 5 minutes to get a response, we'd have had more instant feedback and more in-depth discussions possible. Largely, the communication text functioned well, but it could have been quicker, could have been smoother. So that's kind of what we're taking as GovAlpha for how we will manage the next emergency differently and hopefully better. And now, if anyone has any questions after that big dump of information, please feel free to ask them. We have representatives, I think, from most of the core units here. So your questions don't have to be for GovAlpha, they can be for other people as well. But please just let us know if you've got anything you want to say.
I might just add, while people are possibly formulating questions, just huge thanks to everyone who participated. We didn't, necessarily name everyone because there are a lot of people involved, and we tried to give this out as with a little bit of notice so we could add stuff in that maybe we weren't aware of. But yeah, obviously we'll be talking about this on the forum. So if there are other items that need to be included, we can kind of round out there. But huge thanks to all the teams and everyone who really stepped up and was present despite the hour and the uncertainty of the situation. I know financial runs are particularly scary for individuals too, right? Like, I know I was quite worried about the status of the banking system over the weekend, and but it's really great to have a team just laser focused on getting things done. Cool. So yeah, if there are any questions about that timeline, about the emergency response, lessons learned, happy to go over those now. Otherwise, we can move on into MIP65.
Yeah, Raphael, go ahead.
Yeah, just a short note about the reducing the GSM. This was temporary, or this is like gonna stay at 16 hours going forward? So
the intent is for this to be temporary. This was purely because we didn't know if the contagion was going to spread, more banks would fall. Whether thankfully USDC has now returned mostly to Peg, so it's less of a concern now. But we very much, think it should go back up. Probably not in the next executive, but maybe the one after, just to make sure that we are out of the woods as much as possible.
Yeah, totally. Because I think that's just what my point there is, that always, like, during times of intense stress or panic, it seems like that the decisions that we made in calmer times are like not sufficient enough, and we need to move quicker and not be as secure. But I think these are usually the times when the judgment is most clouded. So I tend to view any kind of last minute changes during times of great stress and panic as less valid than ones that were taken when there was ample time to consider and reconsider.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing is making sure that we've got the tools in place as well. So now we've added the line mom contract. We can now basically turn off the PSM without waiting 48 hours. So that actually, would have been very useful on Saturday morning when the sky was falling and we didn't know what was happening. And I suspect that would be at the kind of time where you would want to pull that ripcord. But we didn't have those tools available until the exec that went through on Monday. We also have a tighter gap now, so you wouldn't see the big influx of USDC that we saw over the weekend happening because the parameters have changed. So instead of taking on 1.5 billion or however much it ended up being, we would have taken on 250 million to 400 million, and that would have been a better defense as well. So I think the combination of those two changes having been made, I think we can have confidence that we now have the tools to respond in a better way moving forwards. But I fully understand, it makes me nervous having it as low as it is, but I'm also nervous that, further banks may fall and, we may need to respond quickly.
Yeah, and I definitely echo that. And yeah, I think it's really important that we do return it back to the parameter it was as soon as we feel safe. Like, that's kind of our judgment of how we're doing right now. But obviously there's other finance experts, people who might say, you're actually better or worse than you are. And we plan to listen to those. But the only context I wanted to add to the 16-hour decision was it was very much based on business opening and this idea that, overnight, particularly with banks and banking hours, new information might come to light. So we were really hoping we could feel comfortable with the ability to see news, see reaction, get something passed before open the next day, just so the protocol can be prepared. But I think the resounding discussion in a lot of the private channels was just that, in general, a lot of our stuff is too slow for emergency response. So having things like moms, having specific things that can break the governance delay, but can't be used in a super malicious way, or at least would at least for the moms, you have to pass the spell anyway, right? So if you have the voting power to pass the spell on your own, that's probably not the thing you're looking to do. So I think the development of more moms kind of allows us to go back to increasing that parameter. Probably got buried in the form, but some people might notice I did post a MIP for increasing it to 72 hours not too long before this crisis. And that just kind of highlights how hard the parameter setting is, because when you're in times of calmness, you really want a really slow, predictable MakerDAO, but in times of crisis, you really need to be prepared to react. Comment from BMC in the chat on the Protego, right? I think things like Protego, Astro had like a defender type system as well. Like, I think incidents like these really show the advantages of having other governance protection mechanisms other than just the GSM, because it is such a brute tool of like, okay, you want to do something, sit on your hands and hope the world doesn't collapse while we wait. Classical. All right, one last call. I know we spent a little bit of time on this, so I'm sorry here's running on so long, but did feel it was important to document for the community. But if there are any other questions, happy to address those. And if we have time in the discussion section, obviously feel free to bring up anything that comes to mind later. All right, so for discussion, we had kind of talked about having Montalis and on to talk about MIP65. A number of the polls that just ended, we highlighted at the top of the call. Obviously, between our time of like wanting to do that, we had a discussion on the DVC. Sorry, couldn't remember the acronym last night. Yeah, it was just last night. So I expect, like, especially given how heated that discussion was, we might be dealing with some follow-up, but I thought it probably makes the most sense to just kind of like set the scene, at least from the governance perspective. And then I was going to hand over the mic to Alan from Montalis, and we can dig into a little things after that. But kind of the reason that this is on the forefront of everyone's mind, there's been some discussion about the return of fees from the structure, right? Like these are essentially Montalis is investing in ETFs. That invest in bonds, right? Mostly treasuries. So they generate a yield. We are hopefully making money on those, and so far we are making money on those. But the MIP itself was a little vague in terms of how the process for returning funds work. It said that it should happen quarterly, but you do need a like full-on measure in an executive to instruct the rest to do that. So we started this facility, started ramping up in November of last year, but we have not yet had a return. Luckily, the poll for doing the return passed, and I intend to bundle that in the next executive so we can get that instruction out. But while looking into the fee returns and all that stuff, there were some discrepancies noted with the payment structures for Montalis. Again, we kind of had not a lot to go off in terms of the public agreements. We had the same commitment of quarterly payments, but a few people in the chat and on Discord noting that like 2 payments occurred in December of last year, what people were confused about because it had even been a full quarter at this display of the facility. Excuse me. So a lot of stuff has happened. I'll probably leave it to Alan to talk about what their response was and kind of this new, much more clear-cut structure they're proposing for the fees. But hopefully that's a somewhat decent background of like where we are, why is this happening, and then the only other bit to add in would be the 2 polls that were passed today on increasing the debt ceiling and removing the debt ceiling instant access module. So essentially, when implemented, this would allow Montalis to pull funds not limited to that like 100 million per, I think it was 24 hours, but not limited to a DCIM structure. They could pull as much as they felt necessary up to the maximum debt ceiling once that is implemented. So obviously the confluence of all those things happening at once got a lot of people chatting, but I'm hoping that just by discussing the situation, talking about what we're going to do going forward, we can kind of find some common ground and see like what we can learn as a DAO from all this. Alan, if I mischaracterized anything, please feel free to correct me. Just kind of going off the cuff here with the information at hand. But I did see on the call, Alan, if you're open to talk a little bit about what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So firstly, I think we should, of course, thank the community for, the confidence in putting the vote through here, so we can start deploying. I think it fits well with the strategy that seems to be pursued by Maker to get some more yield. So that's that's great. We want to try and see if we can help as much as possible in that regard. We of course have tried to address the fact that there was a mistake in the past, and basically look forward for that, and have gotten one of the pieces, which is sort of the fee structure for Monetalis, very clear, and it basically a simple sum, and put it forward in a public agreement. So we never ever have the situation that we had previously. So let's then move forward. That's what we would prefer there in that, and discuss what's going to happen next in terms of MIP65, given where we are now. I think it's good to take stock at where we are. I've tried to write it a few times. So MIP65 is not really Monetalis as much as it is Maker. We have to remember that this trust structure and everything that sits there is controlled and handled by Maker via Maker resolutions as being the only sort of instruction point, and has actually now, I think, is pretty much setting the market standard, or at least a very strong market reference case for how DAOs are able to access the TradFi markets. It's been quite good at we've kept ourselves very close to European shores, if you like. So we've set up a structure and worked with banks out of Switzerland, and that has worked quite well in terms of not getting involved in any of the big problems that came out of the US, and it has worked quite well with these partners. The Maker resolutions have worked quite well and to spec. So it's great to see now that we get a chance to return some of this money that's been generated from the ETFs, and now deploy some more so we can start earning some more yield to the Maker protocol. Now, I think it's important to note that this is not sort of something that we've just, it's Monetalis who's built it or anything like that. There's been an immense amount of input from a lot of the CUs in Maker over the past years, right? It's not we've just gone back to a place and built it all. No. CES has been a great help to figure out how to work with smart contracts and how to get the processes they have integrated into a legal space, strategic finance in terms of thinking about what are a lot of the assets to use and what are the best ways to do it. And of course, previously, we have to say that Christian was a great help from his experience with some of other protocols to design what was designed here. And of course, growth in terms of reaching out to many of the different parties that we are now trying to put into this sort of relationship and ecosystem. I think the ecosystem that we've built now is quite strong. We have the two banks, and we're trying to make sure that there's access to all the redemption channels which means that, that are relevant for Maker. So we've got USDC, USDP, and GUSD. So it is somewhat vital to have access to somebody who could redeem USDC, somebody who could redeem GUSD and USDP. So with that, we have quite a strong infrastructure to work on. So I think that's quite something, and it's not really it's a very big collaborative product of a lot of people in the Maker protocol. That's why I think I want to start with saying to make sure that everybody understands those backgrounds. What's going to happen now, to be clear about that, is really that we will go back and now develop the pieces of documentation that are needed to make this deployment happen. And the way we structure things is maybe you've seen this before, but fundamentally there is a human computer part, and there sort of is a human programming part. The human computer part are all the agreements and deed polls and trust documents and so on that sets the computer up. It sort of says, this is how it's supposed to work. This is how the beneficiaries are defined. This is how reporting agreements are done, and so on and so forth. All these pieces needs to be set up. Luckily, a lot of the work was done previously for the first trust, but here, because of compartmentalization, we try to set up a second trust, or we will set up a second trust. So we have the first 500 million in one trust and the 750 in a second trust. That makes sort of good risk management. And when we've set up all this documentation and agreements, we then need to do the programming, which basically is that we take all these agreements and we put it through an executive vote, which says, dear trustee, you're now allowed to execute the following agreements. And then we do another one that basically sets out how they are to deploy this U.S. Treasury letter that we're intending to deploy here. It's important to note that as all these documentation agreements are now being put together, they're being put together based upon what was done previously. And of course, Reed Smith is counsel. And then on top of that, of course, maybe Sean will provide sort of legal review of it. So that's really what's going to happen next. As soon as the liquidation gets into the next executive, we'll execute that. And then after the liquidation is done, then hopefully as all these agreements gets put out, gets community review and gets the appropriate legal review, we'll then put the 750 out for deployment for execution as well. I think that's sort of what's going to happen next. If there's any questions on what happens next, I think we're very happy to take those, I think. But I think the really big picture here is that this is really a big advantage for Maker to have this type of structure in place. And it's great that Block Tower is building a comparable or something similar, because it would be great to have two of them. But it is sort of what allows the MakerDAO strategy to, I guess, evolve over to having more our real world efforts included into it. And as I said, please don't think that this is just something we just deployed by and developed by Monetalis. It's a much broader a much broader set of people who's actually been involved in making it happen.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you making the time to come on here. And do welcome questions about the structure and how we're moving forward. I did see one question in chat that isn't quite on that, but does feel relevant given the current banking situation. And you mentioned going through banks and Switzerland, a lot of people worried about Credit Suisse. Not that those two are connected, but
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. So no. It's a really fair point. So we've actually been. So, I mean, over this weekend where all these things happened, we also got hold of both banks, both SEBA Bank and Signum Bank, and got hold of their senior management to show basically their financial statements or confirm what their financial status was. I simply have not had time, but we'll also publish something about their financial status. They're both under Basel and have, good ratios generally. So they're and are not really invested in any long term. So we did very quickly check out whether there were any issues there with the banks. Now the great thing is that we're buying securities, so they lie in custody, and this is statutory custody. So even if something were to happen to a bank, you're very, very well protected by the fact that you've purchased securities and they're in statutory custody. That's a good point.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I did see a hand from David. If you still have a point, you're welcome to make it.
Yeah, Alan, I have two concerns here. I've seen a little bit, and I haven't been able to keep abreast as much as I'd like to of some of the drama about the payments that were just made by the trustee, and I think Monetalis getting in advance. I guess my main concern here is that this points out a flaw in the structure of the trust agreements, and as a smallholder of Maker. And maybe someone who wants to use DAI, I would be interested in how and what is being done to rectify those trust documents, so that a similar situation where one person can request a payment doesn't happen again. And could the community get a legal opinion about those trust arrangements before we increase exposure to 750 million. So that's one issue. The other thing I do find shocking here is the lack of counterparty risk assessment that's been done for this exposure increase. Exactly to the last question, you got Credit Suisse going under. They follow BAL guidelines as well, BIS, SVB, American banks. We have no legal opinion on the custody stuff. So what is being done there to make sure when this treasury ladder is done, that Maker's funds and the money backing DAI is protected.
Oh, okay. So I guess I'll let me try and answer those two. So firstly, there are actually the fee question lies in the agreement that's called the reporting agreement. There is no other way for Monetalis to gain anything. So that's the single agreement, and you can see it now. We've gotten it, so it's no longer confidential. So it is there, and as soon as we put it into an executive, this will basically override any other agreement that might be in there. So that's that. There is no further in terms of that. That's the forward-looking approach. We have a open payment, and it's a fixed fee, and it's put in there, and there are no further problems in the particular trustee or structure or anything like that. To that effect, of course, the legal opinions will be provided by the appropriate MakerDAO legal resources. So that's that side of it. In terms of counterparty risks, I think we'll write some more about the counterparty. In this particular case, it's Bank Signum, and if it's a general view from the community that they would like to understand what are the custody risks of having something in a Swiss statutory bank, I think that's something we can provide. That should be no problem. If that helps. I mean, broadly speaking, we did a lot of reviews of that bank previously, and yeah, we'll publish some more about it. And I like the idea of putting some more out about the custody side of it. So sure, we're happy to provide that.
Okay, thanks, Alan.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I mean, to a large degree, this is we really are keen on seeing this as a collaboration. We are very open to as much as we, all ideas and concepts and so on, and protections. We certainly are. So yeah, if others have other great ideas, we can provide it or try and provide and see what we can do. We definitely want to do this in the safest possible way for MakerDAO. No doubt.
And we did have a question earlier from one of our delegates, and you kind of talked about how this particular crisis, maybe it's not a good example, but you can think of one like if the peg was breaking upward, for instance, rather than downward, right? We might have been losing all of our USDC. And then, I'm not the risk expert, but, a risk person might say, oh, well, we know we have all this monetized treasury, so why don't we convert those into cash and fill it back up? How would that unwind process work? And how long does it take if the Maker community did decide that they needed to try to get those funds?
Yeah, so actually, as perhaps some of you know, we were sort of asked about exactly this concept over this weekend as all this unfolded. So we spent most of our weekend trying to figure out what we could do here with the structure should something like that happen. So that's also why we're now so keen on making sure that all the redemption paths are available, because fundamentally, if you think about where we were at that point in time, it would have been important to have a clear redemption path for USDC and or potentially a trading path. I mean, preferably a redemption path where you get $1 for each USDC. And if it was like, you want it to be the first in the line to get them. So, that's where we already had Coinbase, and we know they were opening on Monday. So we thought that was something to speak to, and we tried to engage with the people to start seeing if Circle could be a possibility. So we started there as well. And then discussions with the banks of what to do. The key problem we would have at this particular moment, to be honest, is really that, as you were to redeem things from Coinbase, USDC, or from Circle or others, as you can send the money to a lot of these banks, but there is a limit to how much you can send per day. And when we're talking about these sizes of money that Maker actually has, it would take us a little bit of time. So that's also why we're to be prepared in case anything like that should happen again, that we have banks of even larger size involved in this. At this moment, probably with Coinbase and Circle, we could convert everything into dollars very, very fast, as in a few days. And with the banks that we have right now, it would take more than a week to get everything into securities. Basically, that's the end of it. But they're all ready, and they were all very receptive to discussing, even over the weekend for how to manage the situation. So it's a good thing to have. It's really helpful.
Thanks, Alan. And I am seeing a hand from Paper. Paper, take it away.
Yeah, so a couple of the issues that seem to have cropped up over the last, or brought to our attention over the last couple of weeks, and I'm hoping that you have a way to build an improvement on this into the next trust. As one was that there's just not a clear way to get a hold of the trustee when there are time-sensitive matters. So I don't have a specific suggestion there, but it would be really nice to see some way for that to happen for the future trust. The second was have some kind of safeguard that prevents the trustee from entering into legal arrangements without maybe not necessarily seeking approval from governance, but at least informing governance. So, a lot of the hubbub came down to what was ultimately a non-public agreement with the trustee that people didn't have knowledge of. And so it created a lot of surprise. So I think it would be good to avoid situations like that if the entering into of legal agreements at least had to be passed on as informed to governance. I don't know that it's necessarily needed that it seek explicit approval, because what if it's just opening an account at Gemini to redeem GUSD if in the future, right? That may never get used. That kind of thing really shouldn't require governance approval if there's no money moving or involved yet. So that's something I'd like to see, is a way to contact the trustee, and then a way to stay informed so there's not surprises.
Yeah, so we're working hard on the to make as many of the documents as public as available, and those that are not public, can we do something to make at least some parts of it public? I mean, some of these things relates to banks who won't release their terms and conditions, banks who won't release their fees. Some of these trustees and service guys are very cautious about any agreements that they've entered into are public. But we're really trying to get to a place where as much of this is public as possible. In terms of information, I agree. I want to set some sort of measure, as in, as you said, Gemini contract. Well, fine, you onboard it with Gemini. It's not a big deal. But if you're engaging with anything more, we need to get it have some sort of measure for when it needs to move to something that needs to be reviewed elsewhere or discussed further or informed of, right? So that we'll definitely try and put in place as well. At this moment, the two channels for communication with the trustee is basically MakerDAO resolutions and somebody to explain them that here's the MakerDAO resolution and you should do what it says. And then, of course, the reporting agent who basically just gets data from them and can engage with them and so on. So how we add some other things or some, as you say, emergency pool, I understand the point. I'll try and see how we can put that in. They're all well taken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just commenting in the chat about creating a formal contact process is probably not trivial, in that we might have to find a way to pay for it anytime there's a formal inquiry and prevent spam. But that sounds just like a governance procedure we do create for things if there's a need. So I don't know. That's a curious idea.
Sure. Good. So yeah, I
Alan, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Yep. I was wondering, do you guys have any capability or a future capability of, instead of going to USDC, from cash to USDC, to go from cash directly to DAI? I'm asking because one of the emergency provisions that Maker Governance approved is a sort of circuit breaker on the PSMs, and that would shut down the ability to use the PSMs to swap back to DAI from USDC.
Oh.
And of course, if there's an actual problem with USDC depegging, it doesn't help Maker to repeg DAI by sort of going through that circuit. So I was wondering if there's a sort of future plan in the work to try and be able to deal directly in DAI.
So we have access. So Signum is able to trade cryptocurrency, and they're able to trade DAI to US dollars. So we have the capability there. I mean, it would be great to have more, but we definitely have one that's able to do it at this moment.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. So there is definitely one because we already from the get-go we tried to send USDC via Coinbase because that's the only way you can do the transformation for free, right? That's the cheapest way. So that we were keen on, but we always wanted a way out. As in, what if for some reason it breaks down or somebody does something? So Bank Signum always were the, I think it's one of the few, definitely one of the few banks where DAI is actually as an okay currency, as okay listed and so on, as I understand it. So we could, if we move DAI into basically the trust accounts, I mean, in the appropriate way and whatnot through the executives and whatnot. But then if you put it in there, they would be able to trade it into US dollars, over a period of time, of course.
To add a little color there, I think the question was about coming back the other way. So like this weekend, we saw an opportunity for RWA providers to basically get almost a 10-cent discount on DAI.
Okay, they can also try it the other way. Yeah. Okay, they can also trade the other way. As in, you've got US dollars and you'd like to get some DAI out, right?
Yeah. So in that case, that would allow an RWA borrower to close their vault out at a huge discount, and then once the peg returns, redraw and pull again. But we didn't see that happening over the weekend, and some color on why not just Monethalis, but other RWA borrowers may not have done that.
Maybe I can.
So it's impossible to move this fast. And definitely we can't deploy or liquidate without a executive, right? We need one of these MakerDAO resolution instructions to do anything. I mean, be that buy or sell or liquidate or anything like that. So it couldn't happen. And if it was done, to be honest, it works on banking hours, right? As in the traditional financial system, which is not 24/7, 7 days. So if I were to even press the button for liquidation, it wouldn't be liquid before, over Monday, really. With the appropriate, approvals.
And just to add the color, so as Alan said, Signum can convert to DAI. That's a backup plan because it's a bit more expensive than free, at least. And on repaying this weekend, well, as Alan said, you cannot sell treasury bills or even ETFs in the weekend. You need an executive vote, so that would take at least, let's say, 1 or 2 weeks. And the other borrowers, because we are not lending to the trust. I mean, we are lending in technical terms, but actually we are not lending. We are contributing capital to the trust, and we can ask it to redeem. But if no one is making any decisions in BVI for this, they will not do anything except instructed. And for the other borrowers, well, they are making loans. And if loans are not maturing and none is maturing in the weekend, they don't have cash and they cannot move cash neither in the weekend.
Yeah.
But you are correct that having the MOM and changing the TIN and tout have an implication for those borrowers as well. So which reach to them Monday or at the beginning of the week to be sure that it would work nicely and to inform them that Monday was not the time to repay your loan because most are using Circle and USDC. And there was a big TIN.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Evan. Appreciate the questions from the community there. Had some good points in chat mode. I don't know if there's anything worth bringing to the call, but if you did want to say any more on the situation, you're obviously pretty involved with everything. Don't feel pressure to though. So welcome any further questions. Yeah, I think we kind of covered proposed steps for implementation. Yeah, good. Appreciate that.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you very much for having us. We're very happy. It was an opportunity to answer.
Right on. We do have a few more minutes that we typically keep the call open. I know we covered a lot of ground today, both in terms of like emergency response, what's going on with the PEG and everything. We had a bit more time this week. We could have got an old-fashioned state of the PEG report together. That would have been pretty cool. And maybe we'll save that for the future. But yeah, if we do want to ask any more questions, go over anything else we've talked about today, or bring something out from left field, there are a few minutes for it. Now, I'll give you guys a moment to respond. Otherwise, we'll think about winding down. All right, well, really appreciate all the voices that participated today. It's always great when we can hear from so many different people who are part of our Maker community and care about what we're doing here. So we'll be back same time, same place next week. Do keep in mind out that those ratification polls, it's a huge cycle, right? Not quite record-breaking number of polls that we posted Monday, but we did get pretty close. And we still have 18 of those ratification polls closing a week from Monday. So do be sure to take a look, ask any questions in chat or the forum. And yeah, thank you all again. We'll see you next week. Bye.